And we are back again with another episode of We Got That Smoke. None other than Dr. John Henrik Clarke.
He would be in the Jamaica of this day because the revolutionary atmosphere that could protect the Marcus Garvey does not exist in Jamaica. It does not exist any place in the Caribbean island for this day. Okay, now let's come to the United States and let's look at its antecedents in the United States. My main point here is that Marcus Garvey did not announce anything new, but brought it in such a way and put it in a language that masses of people could understand. You could whistle it, you could feel it, that his time was so good. Now, 1787 in the United States, there had emerged in New England a small black elite. Frederick Douglass, Prince Hall, who started the Masons, called it the African Lodge. Blacks had fought in the American Revolution, began to demand a little privileges based on that. Blacks had grown tired of going into white churches and sitting on the side or up in the buzzard's roof. And they had challenged whites, and after the challenge they found the independent black church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. They didn't toy with this word Negro or colored. They didn't water it down with black. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. And they didn't deal with this word fro. There is no fro in Africa. When an Italian, you ask Italian what he said, I'm Italian American. He didn't say I'm a fro. Spell it out, Italian American. So get it out of your mouth. I mean, say it straight. African. Get the word Africa all the way in there. And don't break Africa with the word fro. Leave out the fro. I'm saying that at this point in our history, we were not only longing for Africa, we were having thoughts about return 100 years before Marcus Garvey was born. In the African Lodge, in the early African societies, the first Masonic order found by a man from Barbados, Prince Hall, Odd Fellows, found by a man from Antigua, Peter Ogden. Now look what you got then that you don't have now. Caribbean people and African American people working hand side by side. No one is calling each other any name. But they realized something then you don't realize now. That the slave ship brought no West Indian, brought no black Americans, brought no Jamaicans. Because they were all African people, they had a common interest as African people. Now, first Masonic order found by a Caribbean person, Prince Hall. Another lodge found by another one, Peter Ogden. And when they began the early Back to Africa movement, when Martin Delaney went out to search for a place for settlement, he went out with a Jamaican Robert Campbell, who wrote a classical account of the trip, Pilgrimage to My Motherland, included in a book called Search for a Place. Delaney was a Harvard man. and he issued a Harvard man's report. His English was superb. All the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed. But if you ever get the book, make a comparison. Read Campbell's book. His language is rough-hewn. Sometimes his sentence structure is off. But the man's love for Africa, for returning to Africa, his response to Africa is pure poetry, pure commitment. Now, we're working together now. Instead of calling names, making division. Our first newspaper, Freedom Journal, is edited by another Jamaican, a Jamaican mulatto, John B. Ruswan. After he finished the editing of Freedom Journal, he went out to Liberia and edited the Liberian Herald, a paper that's still in existence. And he was governor of one of the provinces. He didn't say, I'm a West Indian governor, I'm a Jamaican governor. He said, I'm a governor. You have to understand that this early manifestations of Pan-Africanism before it had its name, and that all of this was preparation for the ultimate emergence of a Marcus Garvey. David Walker's appeal, Nat Turner revolt, Gabriel Prosser revolt, Denmark Beese's revolt, especially David Walker's appeal to the colored people of the world to take up arms against your enemy. All Marcus Garvey was at it. Let's leave this place. Coming near the end of that century, a back to Africa minister, again, a mulatto who thought that by virtue of being close to whites, he deserved some privileges. And when he discovered that his tail could be kicked just as hard as the black is black, he began to fight like the black is black. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. He would mount an American flag in his pulpit before his sermon. Then he would point to the flag and say, this flag ain't nothing but a GG rag. And he would preach a whole sermon against what this country had done to his people before he started his regular sermon. He started the Back to Africa movement around the same time Marcus Garvey was born. And as we came into the 20th century, we were arguing over the Booker T. Washington concept, the Du Bois concept. Africans had been revolting all over Africa. The Caribbean islands are now fighting for some form of constitutional government. England had created a model colony in Barbados. This is why they still think of themselves as Little England. All of this had happened now. Marcus Garvey would begin to emerge into consciousness around 1908. After his Central American trip, he would go to England where he would meet Dewes Muhammad Ali. Now, when he returned to Jamaica and tried to find the Universal Negro Improvement Association and failed in Jamaica, he came to the United States with the hope of getting the kind of money he needed to establish a school like Tuskegee. Booker T. Washington had issued him an invitation in 1914, but when he arrived in 1916, Booker T. Washington was dead, and he couldn't get along with the people Booker T. Washington left behind. He toured the United States, speaking and impressing a whole lot of people with his nerve. Now here you have to deal with something which you fail to deal with. When you grow up in a country where you are the majority, you have a different outlook on the world, though you are a slave.
Yeah, John Henry Clarke is snapping. Snapping. I'm sure many of you did not know the information that he displayed. I didn't know a lot of the information that he displayed on Marcus Garvey. So therefore, you should have your paper and your pen writing things down. But we're going to get back to the subject.
Marcus Garvey had a different outlook on the world. When you grow up in a country where you are the minority, where you have to do what most black Americans still have to do, you rise each morning and petition a white person for the right to live to the end of the day. And you can say I'm wrong, but think it over. Who do you have to get a job from? And even if you own your business, who do you have to get your products from? If you're selling vegetables, who's your wholesaler? We still rise each morning, one way or the other, petition one white person or the other for the right to live to the end of the day. Marcus Garvey came to America at a time after the First World War. Blacks were returning, being put upon riots, East St. Louis. Blacks just go to a gate and ask for jobs and were driven away. They made bonfires and burned black children. And in Chicago, the riots were widespread. Marcus Garvey would go to Chicago and rally the blacks. They didn't need much rallying because they had freshly arrived from the South looking for jobs in packing houses, looking for jobs in Chicago. And they'd taken so much abuse in the South that up north they said they wasn't going to take it. Many of them began to grease wire, put it across the street. And so when the thugs came in, that car hit the wire, that stopped the car, then the black thugs would jump out and teach them a lesson. That stopped the riots. Marcus Garvey had told them, look what you see, they don't want us here. Not only let's go home to Africa, let's go home in our own ships. Now the dreamer began to dream the great dream. It was after the First World War. The Secretary of War, Newton B. Baker, had told black Americans that your lot will not be changed by virtue of participating in this war. And to prove that his point, some blacks were lynched in their uniforms. We give you nothing. Blacks were not permitted in combat in the American army. Young Pershing didn't want them near the battlefield. The French said that I will take all you got. And the blacks who distinguished themselves in battle distinguished themselves under French commanders. The Red Cross, going to the field to pick up the wounded and the dead, left the blacks to die. Du Bois had written an editorial called Close Ranks. Let's forget our differences and let this war be won. And when he went to France and saw the condition, he wanted to take it all back. Close ranks for what? Now, in this atmosphere, 1917, in the red summer of 1919, riots all over the country, burning blacks down. Now can you see why it was easy for Marcus Garvey to create the atmosphere and to add to the atmosphere of return, because the country had rejected us, and he was telling us that it's a land that is yours. He said the American promise wasn't made to you. The American dream wasn't dreamed for you. I will make you a new promise. I will give you a new dream, and I will give you a new land. That's Africa. 1920, he was called the largest convention of blacks ever. Old Madison Square Garden, turning back 30,000 people a day, and only 30,000 could fit into the auditorium. Marcus Garvey was doing more than just giving out speeches. This man, with his multifaceted of talent, presented a platform for singers, dancers, musicians. He was creating the semblance of a state. And what we have lost in the world is the idea that we once ruled a state all our best. During the same time, he would petition Liberia, that sick nation that rejected him and would have been a better nation had they not rejected him. He petitioned them for settlement. 1920. They did not tell him then that they wasn't going to permit him, because these stooges of America, who hadn't changed to this day, lied to Marcus Garvey. And someone thinks that because Du Bois had a fake position, plenipotentiary, that Du Bois had some power. Du Bois had no power. I think we need to be honest with ourselves. I think we charged Du Bois with a whole lot that he was guilty of. He said some unfortunate things about Marcus Garvey and later lived to take it back. Took it back on several occasions. He did something most of you haven't done. You haven't admitted when you were wrong. Now, in 1923, Marcus Garvey is in difficulty with the steamship line. The different trials, this would go on. Marcus Garvey would commit some serious errors. He would dismiss his lawyer and be his own lawyer, and he would lose his own case. There's much more to it than that. In this book, there's a chapter called Trials and Triumphs of Marcus Garvey. But the complete trial is available in some places you can get the complete trial. Marcus Garvey was not guilty as charged. This is why I'm against the idea of pardoning Marcus Garvey. To pardon him indicate that he was guilty, and you're asking people to forgive the guilt. I'm for the vindication of Marcus Garvey because he wasn't guilty in the first place. I'm for asking this nation to apologize for having imprisoned him. But in 1927, he was freed from Atlanta prison. While he was away, the organization did not fall apart, but became shattered into several factions. Because we are people with bruised ego, and we suffer terribly from ego starvation. We haven't envisioned an army full of generals with no privates, because everybody want to be Mr. Somebody and Mrs. Somebody. We argue among ourselves, split up, and now we got 10 heads instead of one, and neither one of them achieving anything. We are the most organized, we are the most meatinest people in America. We have more leaders and less leadership. than any people in this country. With no centralized leadership responsible for the whole people. What would happen after the deportation of Marcus Garvey? The movement would go on in some fashion. T. Thomas Fortune, one of the great journalists we have, would still continue to work for the old Negro world, to write for it. We could continue to be its editor. It would still attract some of the most able African-American minds of that day. Farris, one of the finest intellects to come out of the Garvey movement, was now in the process of his book, The Africans Abroad, still worth reading after all these years. In the shadow of the Garvey movement, a whole literature emerged. Tony Martin, Wellesley College, who did the book Race First, have done some smaller books dealing with different aspects of Garveyism, Garvey Pan-Africanism, literary Garveyism, Garvey as a hero. All these books need to be read. We as a people overhear conversations and sometimes with a cocktail in our hand, and we become authorities on what we've heard, but we didn't read the book. Why don't you shock me by reading a whole book? Every page of it. Then quote correctly when you quote it. Marcus Garvey in Jamaica would run for public office. He would win once. Second time around, the mulatto group that he had attacked so scathingly was waiting for him the second time. He would lose on a technicality. He would find himself in debt. He would go back to his trade as a master printer. He would pay off his debts. And then he would prepare to go to England. As he boarded the ship going to England, all the reporters gathered around to hear the last words of Marcus Garvey before he departed. He says, all right, come on, let me, I got something to say. Yes. Listen. And in the silence, with that pierced pause, this great message, Marcus Garvey said, Jamaica is a ridiculous country. Ha! A contradiction to end all contradictions. Marcus Garvey knew something that Jamaicans still don't seem to know. They could have been one of the great island nations of the world. They got so involved with color, caste, and class, they did not become. They got so involved in being those things most unlike themselves. They could not become what they needed to become to develop that great potential. It may not be too late. Then again, it may be too late. They have the manpower, they have the educational power, they have the brain power, they have the trained personnel, they've got a good, strong working class, they've got a country with a good basic climate, a lot of greenery everywhere. It generally rains at night, and so when you wake up in the morning, things are green. With a little manipulation, it can grow most of the things it needs to eat, the things it needs to eat. It don't have to import Kellogg's cornflakes. They can make cornflakes out of Jamaican corn. To use your imagination. Jamaica once made a good grade of furniture. It's now collector's items that you can ever get to buy a piece. Good Jamaican mahogany existed then. They cut it so fast until now they have to wait 20 years before it's mature enough to cut again. Jamaican mahogany used to have 7 different grains, 7 different colors of mahogany. a light mahogany, a dark mahogany, a brownish mahogany. Can you think of making a piece of furniture with all that beautiful design on it? I went to a school in Jamaica where the schoolmaster showed me a bed, and he said my grandfather was born on this bed. I was born on the bed. My mother was born on the bed. The bed was so strong you could put a truck on top of the bed and wouldn't even dent it. Good old mahogany. You don't see that kind of wood anymore, and you don't see that kind of craftsmanship anymore, because people don't take that amount of time anymore. Now let me conclude something that has no conclusion, because Marcus Garvey is part of a continuum. He would set in motion the thought pattern that would bring African independent nations into being. He would so influence people in Africa until in Swaziland, an old king thought that his people about to return began to plant extra crops to feed them when they got there. The concept of Garveyism was that strong. His newspapers were given to different sailors and dropped off in different ports in other parts of the world. Cuba had 27 branches of the Garvey movement in Cuba. There were 16 branches in South Africa. I've gone through a lot of the Garvey records. I advise you that you should read Robert Hill's documents of the Garvey papers. The 6th volume is already out. I have up to 5 right now. The documentation is just absolutely magnificent. One of the great jobs of research done in our times by a black scholar. Now, Robert Hill's notes and Robert Hill's introductions, scholarly done, but some of his conclusions open the question. But I tell you the one thing you need not doubt: the documents are documents. He couldn't change the documents. And when a definitive history of Marcus Garvey is written, and it may not be done in our time, we will have to rely very heavily on the documents that Professor Hill has brought to our attention. And this is the greatest collection of documents on Marcus Garvey that has ever been developed and edited. His influence would be so widespread that he would be the major influence in the 5th Pan-African Congress, one of the most important, Manchester, England, 1945, with Nkrumah, George Padmore, Peter Abrahams, John Stone Kenyatte, who later became Jomo Kenyatte. People who would later become heads of state in Africa, influenced by the teachings of Marcus Garvey, and who would incorporate the teachings of Marcus Garvey into the structure of that nation. Nkrumah would have a Black Star Square, Black Star Line. Nkrumah's and Marcus Garvey's influence on Nkrumah was profound. Marcus Garvey's influence on the rest of Africa was equally profound. And had these states not been waylaid, imitating the parliamentary procedure of the West that's never going to work in Africa, they could have brought great African territorial states into being as against these imitation European nation states that now exist in Africa. Too restrictive for the African character, too restrictive for African culture. The European created the nation state with its tight borders, its selfishness. The African had the territorial state, where a multiplicity of cultures existed within one border with respect for all. And they did not begin a conflict one to the other until the European came and created that conflict. So-called tribal wars did not start in Africa until the coming of the Europeans. They would put one against the other in order to conquer both. Every person that came into Africa did Africa a disservice. Earlier today, I was accused of Arab bashing in an interview over WNYC. I was saying that the Arab slave trade started 1,000 years before the European slave trade. And that it drained Africa of so much time and energy and organization, the African did not have the organization and the energy to successfully resist the European slave trade. What Marcus Garvey was saying to us, in essence, is that I will make you a whole people again. I will heal the wounds of this 500 years of oppression. He would ask the question, where are your men of affairs? Where are your captains of industry? Having not found them, he began to try to make them. In restoring our confidence in ourselves, the confidence to rule whole nations, he would tell us, up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. Now let's apply that to today, because you have a lot of faith independent states in Africa. How can a nation in Africa be independent when it is so dependent on the European? It does not even produce the safety pin to hold its child's diaper together. Don't even produce the toilet paper for his bathroom. Don't even produce his underwear. No nation of people so unproductive, so unimaginative that they don't even produce their underwear cannot call themselves free. We have to study the Liberia scheme. We must study the over $50,000 in equipment he had placed in Liberia before they told him in 1924 they wasn't going to let him settle. Steam shovels, people who could run brick yards, builders, architects, all the means of a nation. And had he been permitted to settle in Liberia and cure the wounds of that sick nation, the African independence explosion would have occurred a generation before and would have been successful. This dreamer from Jamaica, who is still not understood in Jamaica or in the African world in total, need to be looked at again in context with our future. We might have to step back in order to move forward. We might have to resign ourselves to eating the food we produce, wearing the clothes that we make. We might understand that a nation means self-reliance. We might take an inventory and find out what goes into the making of a nation. And we might start at the top and fulfill all those needs. If you're going to make a locomotive, sometime you might start by making a safety pin. And remember, other people in the world started with less. 200 years ago, the Japanese did not even have a good wheelbarrow. Look at them now. Someone challenged them. Someone challenged them to come out of the lethargy of that culture and meet the challenge of a changing world. The intelligence of a people can be measured by to what extent they adjust and understand the nature of change. We as a people going to have to prove ourselves equal to the nature of change. And to prove yourself equal to the nature of change, you have to prove yourself equal to the nature of revolution. And realize revolution is not always killing people. Revolution is making a dramatic change in your own life and the life around you. Doing for yourself what you've been expecting other people to do for you. You cannot start by hoping to have a great mass around you. You can take the teachings of Marcus Garvey, especially his African fundamentals. You can look at the document compiled by Professor Hill. You can look at the work compiled by Professor Martin, Tony Martin.
Okay, was that phenomenal or what? The master teacher, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, gave us pertinent information in regards to Marcus Garvey and Booker T. Washington. We got a double bubble here. You don't know what you're going to get from Dr. John Henrik Clarke, okay? He will blow your mind if you're on that frequency. I'm just saying. We want to thank you for viewing, you all. Yeah, and we hope that you learned something. Something that sinks in your head. Something that sinks in your gut. Something that sinks in your soul. Because it gave it to you. We got that smoke right here on THEMOSHOW Chicago, where the execution of knowledge is POWER. And on your way out the door, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and the word all to help ensure that you get notifications when I upload videos on YOUTUBE. I'm just saying. And if you haven't been out to the other channel, MOPOWERZ, all one word, no space, and THEMOSHOW Classics, all one word, no space, here on YOUTUBE. I want to thank you for viewing, you all, and it's my hopes that you got something out of the demonstration, because we got that smoke. Thanks for viewing, you all. Peace out and never give up on your DREAM